I work as an operations manager at a mid-sized logistics company. Not glamorous, not insanely high-paying, but stable, steady, predictable. After the life I'd had, predictable felt like a luxury. Our house is a 4-bedroom place on a tree-lined street. Beige siding, dark blue shutters, a front porch just big enough for 2 chairs and a small table. On paper, it's just a property. To me, it's 15 years of sacrifice. 15 years of saying no to vacations, no to nights out, no to impulse buys. 15 years of picking up overtime shifts, staying late at the warehouse, skipping lunches to get ahead. Every brick, every painted wall, every creak in the floorboards has a piece of me in it. My sweat, my fear, my determination. When people come over, they see a normal house. When I look at it, I see the one promise I kept to myself. One day, you and your child will have a home no one can take from you. Life with Evan was simple. He'd go to school, I'd go to work. In the evenings, we'd cook together. Well, I cooked. He stirred things and asked a million questions. Then we'd read before bed. Sometimes he'd fall asleep halfway through a chapter, his hair in his eyes, his hand still resting on my arm. I used to lie there and think, this is it. This is happiness. Quiet, small, but real. But to have this peace, I paid a price. I cut off contact with my mother and sister. Growing up, my father was the balance. He treated my older sister Naomi and me fairly. He'd say, "You're both my girls. I don't love one more than the other." And you know what? I believed him. I felt it. Then he died of a sudden heart attack when I was 15. From that day on, something in my mother Margaret broke, or maybe just shifted. Naomi became the center of her universe, and I became background. When Naomi went to college, Mom paid all her tuition. When it was my turn, she said, "You're tough, Vivian. You'll manage," like it was a compliment. I took out loans. I worked 2 part-time jobs. I studied until my eyes blurred because failure wasn't an option. When Naomi got married, Mom spent over $15,000 on her wedding. A ballroom, fresh flowers everywhere, a 5-tier cake, over 100 guests. A fairy tale, Mom called it. When I got married a year later, Mom handed me an envelope with $500 in it. "That's all I can do right now," she said, smiling like it was generous. When I asked about the difference, she just shrugged. "Vivian, you're strong. You don't need as much help as Naomi. She's more delicate. She needs security." That was the last time I asked my mother why she favored my sister. The answer was clear. I was the one expected to stand on my own. Naomi was the one everyone bent around. Over the years, even our children were treated differently. Birthday presents for Naomi's daughter Bella were expensive and thoughtful. For Evan? Dollar store toys, things that broke within days. I still remember the night Evan held a flimsy plastic car in his hands and looked up at me. "Mom, why does Grandma buy Bella nicer things than me?" My throat closed. I forced a smile and said, "Grandma loves you in her own way." But inside, I knew the truth. In my mother's eyes, I had never been the child to love. I had been the child to use. So I distanced myself. Calls became rare, visits even rarer. Years went by like that, and life, finally, got calm. Until that evening in May 2024 when the doorbell rang. It was a little past 7. Evan and I were in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and arguing gently about how much cheese was too much cheese. "Mom, there's no such thing," he said, already reaching for more. "You say that now. Wait until your doctor says your blood is 80% cheddar," I teased. That's when the doorbell rang. "Can I get it?" Evan asked. "I'll go," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "You keep those cheese-grabbing hands where I can see them." I walked to the door, my mind still half on the stove, but when I opened it, everything inside me went very, very still. On the doorstep stood my past. My mother Margaret, looking exhausted, lines deeper around her mouth. Naomi, her belly round with a 6-month pregnancy, mascara smudged, eyes red like she'd been crying. Little Bella, maybe 7 now, leaning against Naomi's side, clutching a stuffed animal by the ear. Behind them, 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. They weren't just visiting. "Vivian," Mom started, her voice already thick with emotion. "I know this is sudden, but I don't have any other choice." My heart sank. Mom continued, "My house is being renovated. It's too dusty to live in. I can't stay there right now." Before I could answer, Naomi burst into tears. Real or not, I couldn't tell. "I had another fight with David," she choked out. "He's treating me so badly. I'm pregnant and he doesn't care. I didn't know where else to go." I looked at Naomi's hand on her belly, at Bella, who looked tired and small beside them, at my mother, who refused to quite meet my eyes. I could feel the wall I had built over the years, the one that had protected me, starting to crack. They were my family. My mother gave birth to me. Naomi was my sister. However unfair everything had been, Bella was my niece, who had never done anything wrong, and I. Mom? Evan's small voice floated from behind me. He peered around my arm and saw them. Grandma? Margaret's face brightened. Evan, honey, she said, reaching out like everything was perfectly normal. In that moment, with my son watching, it felt impossible to close the door. I swallowed the bad feeling rising in my chest and stepped aside. All right, I said slowly. Come in. We'll figure things out later. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I opened the door to a storm that would tear apart whatever was left of our family. The first week went by, surprisingly smoothly. On the surface, anyway. Mom took over the kitchen like she'd never left it. I won't lie. It had been a long time since I'd eaten meals cooked by her. The food tasted like my childhood. Nostalgia is a dangerous thing. It makes you forget the sharp edges of people. Naomi mostly stayed in the guest room or sprawled on the couch, hand on her belly, muted reality shows playing in the background. Bella and Evan bonded quickly. Their laughter echoed through the house, bouncing off the hallway walls, making it sound almost fuller, warmer. I would come home from work, see everyone together at the dining table, and part of me would think, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe time really can soften things. The company was in its busy season, so I was working late most nights. By the time I got back, dishes were done, the kids were winding down, the house was quiet. I didn't have much energy left to be suspicious. If Mom said her house was under renovation, I believed her. If Naomi said she just needed a place to stay for a while until things smoothed out with David, I accepted that. After all, I told myself, this is what good people do. They help family in crisis. Still, little things bothered me. Evan, my usually talkative boy, started speaking less at dinner. Sometimes he'd stare at his plate, pushing food around, glancing quickly at the adults like he was listening for something. Hey, I'd ask softly when we were alone, everything okay? He'd always nod too quickly. Yeah, I'm fine, Mom. And in the evenings, as I walked down the hallway toward my room, I began to notice something else, the whispering. Mom and Naomi sitting close together on the couch in the living room, their heads tilted toward each other, voices low and fast. But the moment I turned the corner, their conversation would snap in half. Oh, Vivian, how was work? Did you see the weather forecast? It's supposed to rain all week. Harmless words, harmless smiles. But something about how quickly the air shifted when I appeared made my skin prickle. The first few times, I brushed it off. They're probably talking about Naomi and David, I told myself. Marriage problems, private things. Not everything is about you, Vivian. But late at night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, the unease sat on my chest like weight. There was a feeling I couldn't shake. A quiet, cold little thought at the back of my mind. They didn't just come here because they had nowhere else to go. They came here for something. I just didn't know what yet. I didn't want to become paranoid. I didn't want to become the woman who searched for meaning in every glance, every whisper, every paused conversation. But by the end of the second week, it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was pattern. It started small, little cracks in the story they'd sold me. One evening at dinner, while Evan and Bella quietly ate spaghetti at the table, I turned to my mother. Mom, how's the renovation going? Any updates? Did the contractor give you a timeline? She didn't look up from her plate. The workers said they're still waiting for materials, she muttered. Her voice was flat, the kind someone uses when reading a line they didn't rehearse well enough. In 15 years of knowing her habits better than I wished, I could always tell when she was lying. Her eyes stayed down. Her voice became too neutral. Still? I asked gently. It's been almost 3 weeks. Did you call to follow up? I don't know much about those things, she snapped, as though I had accused her of something. I let it go for the moment, but my chest tightened. I turned to Naomi. And you? Has David tried reaching out? Has he asked to see Bella? Naomi's entire face hardened. Her jaw clenched, shoulders stiffened. I don't want to talk about him, she said coldly, stabbing at her food. Bella quietly kept eating, her small shoulders shrinking. Okay, I said softly. I didn't mean to upset you. Naomi didn't reply. And yet, something was deeply off. Not once in 3 weeks had her husband called, texted, visited. He never asked about his daughter, never checked on his pregnant wife, not even a drive-by hello. Either David was unbelievably cruel, or more likely, I wasn't getting the full story. But I told myself it wasn't my place to investigate their marriage. I wasn't a detective, and these were adult problems. Still, I couldn't ignore the shadows growing in the corners of my home. Evan began changing. My son, the boy who talked nonstop about dinosaurs and space and how chocolate tasted different on rainy days, became quiet. Too quiet. He answered questions with one word. He hesitated before speaking. He flinched when Naomi raised her voice at Bella. One night, I found him sitting at the top of the stairs long after his bedtime, staring at the floor. "Sweetheart," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "What's wrong?" He shook his head quickly, almost frantically. "Nothing." His voice cracked on the word. I put my hand on his back. "Evan, you can tell me anything. You know that, right?" He swallowed, hard, but he stayed silent. And that silence told me more than any words could. The whispering escalated. The second and third weeks were full of it. The quiet murmurs in the living room whenever I was upstairs or in the kitchen. The abrupt stop the moment I stepped into the room. The way Naomi's fingers flew across her phone screen whenever I walked past, locking it instantly. Late at night, shadows danced under their doors, silhouettes pacing, gesturing, whispering. I kept telling myself, they're stressed, they're scared, they're family. But the truth was starting to stick its cold fingers into the back of my spine. Something was wrong. Something was planned. Something was coming. And then came the night that changed everything. It was the 20th night since they'd arrived. As usual, I curled up beside Evan on his bed, reading him a chapter from his favorite fantasy series. His eyes were half closed, the blanket tucked under his chin. When I finished the chapter, I marked the page and reached out to turn off the lamp. That's when Evan gently grabbed my wrist. "Mom," his voice trembled. "Can I tell you a secret?" My heart dropped into my stomach. "Of course," I whispered, sitting back down. "You can tell me anything, always." He sat up, his small hands twisting the blanket. "But you can't tell Grandma or Aunt Naomi that I told you. Please, Mom, promise." His eyes were big and shiny. Terrified. "I promise," I said without hesitation. And only then did he whisper the words that cut through my chest like a blade. "A few days ago I heard Grandma and Aunt Naomi talking about you." My heartbeat faltered. He continued, his voice barely audible. "I was in my room playing, and I heard them in the living room. They didn't know I was close. They were whispering, and Grandma she said something about 30 days, and how after that you couldn't kick them out." My body went cold. Evan swallowed again. "And then Aunt Naomi, she laughed and said Mom's so stupid. She never knew anything since she was little." They both laughed. His voice cracked. He looked up at me with trembling innocence. "Mom, were they talking about you? Why did Grandma call you stupid?" It felt like someone poured ice water over my heart. I forced my face to stay calm for him. I couldn't let him see the whirlwind of betrayal that tore through me. I gently pulled him into my arms, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for telling me. You are so brave, and don't you worry. I will take care of everything." He nodded into my chest, but I felt how tightly he was clinging to me. I stayed with him until he finally fell asleep. When I closed his door and walked downstairs, the house felt dark, cold, and unfamiliar. My mother and sister were in their rooms. Nothing looked out of place, but everything felt out of place. I sat on the sofa in the darkness, staring into the shadows, letting the truth collide with everything I had overlooked. 30 days. They were counting days. I knew the law. If someone stayed in your home long enough, they gained legal protections. They could claim tenant rights. Evicting them could take months. Naomi being pregnant would make it even more complicated. I could already see the angles, the setup, the manipulation. And suddenly, all the small lies made sense. The vague renovation story, Naomi's secrecy, their whispering, their sudden arrival with luggage, the insistence that they had nowhere else to go. They weren't desperate, they were strategizing. From the moment they stepped onto my porch with those suitcases, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I, fool that I was, had opened the door. Sleep never came that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, memories flooding back with brutal clarity. My father's fairness, my mother's favoritism, the years of being overlooked, dismissed, used, the $500 wedding gift, the unequal love, the Vivian can handle herself mantra. Every memory sharpened like glass. By sunrise, one thing was crystal clear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one they stepped on. This time I would protect my home, my son, myself. But I needed something more than suspicion. I needed evidence. Real, undeniable proof. Because if I confronted them empty-handed, they would twist it, spin it, cry, lie, and make me the villain. I knew them too well. So the next morning, when we all sat at the breakfast table and my mother set a plate of eggs in front of me, I looked up at her and made my decision. A calm, measured, careful decision. The kind you only make when you know your opponent and you know the next move in the game. "Mom," I said softly, sliding $500 across the table, "I have an important online meeting today. It might take all morning. Could you take Naomi and the kids out to eat? Maybe go shopping? I need the house quiet." Her eyes lit up instantly. "Of course," she said. Naomi nodded, already imagining a day out. They had no idea that while they enjoyed lunch and shopping, I would be turning my home into the one place they could never twist the truth again. By the time the front door closed behind them that morning, I had already pulled out my phone. I knew exactly what I needed to do. 2 hours later, a discreet white van pulled up to my driveway. The technicians who stepped out looked professional, efficient, and most importantly, uninterested in small talk, just how I needed them. They came in, shoes covered, clipboards in hand, and got to work. In 4 rooms, the living room, the kitchen, Naomi's room, and my mother's room, they installed compact security cameras with crystal clear audio. They were so small you'd never notice them unless you already knew where to look. As I watched them drill and tuck wires behind vents and shelves, my stomach twisted into knots. I wasn't doing this because I wanted revenge, or because I wanted to spy. I was doing this because I knew my family, Margaret and Naomi, knew how to lie with a straight face. And if one day things escalated and police got involved, they would cry. They would twist every fact. They would perform. And strangers would believe the trembling pregnant woman and the sad, betrayed mother over the strong, independent daughter every single time. I wasn't going to give them that chance. Not in my house, not with my son living here. When the installers finished, I walked them out and stood in the front yard for a moment, letting the cool morning air hit my face. I could feel the shift, a strange mix of fear and power. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. The first 2 days after that were uneventful, almost suspiciously normal. Mom cooked. Naomi lounged around. Evan and Bella played. I went to work. It was like they were trying to lull me into comfort, like they knew exactly when to quiet their whispers. In the evenings, I reviewed footage on my phone and laptop. Hours of mundane, boring footage. Sometimes I questioned myself. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you misheard. Maybe Evan misunderstood. Maybe they aren't planning anything. But then I remembered the way they laughed, the way they called me stupid, the way they whispered when I walked into the room. I kept watching. Then came the curveball. 3 days after the cameras were installed, I had a short work trip nearby and finished early. It was only 4 in the afternoon when I reached the exit leading toward the part of town where my mother's house should have been. And suddenly I realized something odd. In all these weeks, Mom had never once complained about dust, noise, workers, delays, anything. It was strange. People dealing with renovations complained constantly. Renovations consume your life. So why was she so vague? On impulse, I turned the wheel and headed to her street. As I pulled up to the house, I blinked. For a second, I honestly thought I had driven to the wrong address. The place was spotless. Neat lawn. No tools on the lawn. No construction trucks. No tarps on the roof. No scaffolding. No smell of paint. Nothing. Something was wrong. As I parked and stepped out, the front door opened, and an unfamiliar, middle-aged woman walked out carrying a grocery bag. She paused, confused. Can I help you?" I swallowed. "Sorry, I'm looking for Margaret Lane. She used to live here. I'm her daughter." The woman's eyes softened. "Oh, Margaret, yes, she told us she had a daughter. We bought this house from her over a month ago." My ears rang. "A month?" I repeated. She nodded. "We signed the contract at the beginning of April. Moved in after the closing, maybe 5 weeks ago?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Thank you," I said, backing up. But as soon as I got in my car and shut the door, everything inside me snapped into sharp focus. There was no renovation. They had no home to return to. They had sold the house before they even arrived on my doorstep. The crying, the suitcases, the stories, all of it had been staged. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my pulse pounding against my ears. So that's why they whispered. So that's why they needed the 30 days. So that's why they were calm, so confident. They didn't just want shelter. They wanted my home. It was never about renovation, never about needing help, never about family. It was about taking the only thing I had left that mattered, the one thing I built without them, I drove home with shaking hands. And that night, when I opened my laptop to check the footage again, I couldn't breathe as I clicked the file labeled Day 25. The truth finally spilled. That morning, I had already left for work and Evan was at his art class. Bella was home with them. The camera in the living room captured everything. They didn't whisper. They didn't hide. They spoke openly, confidently, almost gleefully. Naomi leaned back on the sofa, one hand absent-mindedly rubbing her belly. "Just 5 more days," she said, grinning. "After 30 days, she can't kick us out. Not without going through months of court. We'll have the advantage." Mom nodded, her tone calculated. "I told you, as long as we stay calm and don't argue with her, she won't suspect anything." Naomi laughed. A loud, careless laugh I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "And once I give birth here, please. No judge will ever remove a new mother and newborn from the house. Vivian can cry all she wants." Mom tapped her fingers on the sofa arm, smirking. "And if she tries, we'll record a video of her yelling or kicking us out. Put it online. Make her look like a monster. People on the internet love a villain." They both laughed. Then Naomi said the words that turned my stomach to stone. "Vivian's still so stupid, Mom. She's always been easy to manipulate. She never sees what's right in front of her. She thinks she's strong, but she's just desperate to be loved." Mom chuckled. "She was gullible since she was little. Some things never change." Their voices echoed through the speaker. My hands were clenched so tight I thought my nails would cut my palms. My jaw locked so hard I felt my teeth ache. My vision blurred with rage and betrayal. But beneath the anger was something deeper, something colder. Clarity. Everything made sense now. Every lie, every tear, every whisper. They had come to steal my home. They had preyed on my compassion. They had planned everything. And worst of all, they felt proud of it. I sat there staring at the screen. Then I saved the video. Then I backed it up. Twice. After I did, I stood in the middle of my living room, the same room they had laughed in, and made a promise to myself. This house will never belong to them. This time, I will not be the fool. This time, I will fight back. The next morning, I woke up with one plan. This would be their last day under my roof. "Stop!" banned Danai. Continue with Part 4. ChatGPT Danai. Part 4. The Night of Truth. Approx 1,100 words. I didn't rush. I didn't slam doors. I didn't cry. I moved with the kind of calm that only appears when anger has already burned itself into resolve. After I dropped Evan off at school that morning, I returned home, walked upstairs, and opened the door to my mother's room. Everything looked normal. Her folded sweaters, her neatly arranged cosmetics, her slippers placed just so under the bed. Normal. As if the woman who lived here hadn't spent the last 25 days plotting to take everything from me. I pulled out her suitcase, the same one she arrived with, tearful and homeless, and began packing. I didn't throw her clothes. I didn't rip anything. I folded every shirt, every blouse, every pair of pants, neatly, carefully, respectfully, because I wanted no one, especially them, to say I acted out of rage. I wanted this moment, this decision, to be clean. By the time I zipped up the second suitcase, my hands stopped shaking. Naomi's room was next. Her duffel bag was still open on the floor, baby clothes spilling out. A stack of prenatal vitamins on the nightstand. A half-finished glass of water. I packed her things exactly the same way. Neat, precise, efficient. I placed Bella's belongings into her small pink suitcase, tucking her stuffed rabbit between 2 folded dresses. It took almost an hour. When I was done, 5 suitcases stood lined up by the front door. 5 suitcases and 25 days of lies. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and waited. Evan came home around 4:30. When he saw the luggage lined up outside, he didn't ask a single question. He walked over, sat quietly beside me, and leaned his head against my shoulder. He knew. Children always know more than we think. We sat that way until the sun disappeared and the porch light flickered on. At around 7 p.m., a taxi pulled up to the curb. Mom stepped out first, smiling and holding several shopping bags. Naomi followed, slowly, one hand on her pregnant belly, Bella skipping ahead, clutching a small toy. Their faces changed instantly when they saw the suitcases. Shock, confusion, panic. And then fear. I stood up. Mom was the first to find her voice. "Vivian, what is this? Why are our things out here?" My heart was pounding, but my voice came out steady. "I'm returning them to you. You can leave now." Naomi stumbled forward, her voice trembling. "Vivian, I'm pregnant. You can't just throw us out. Are you insane?" I stared at her, at the woman who called me stupid, who laughed about stealing my home, who counted down the days until the law protected her. "No, Naomi," I said quietly. I'm not insane. I just know the truth now. Her eyes widened. What truth? I didn't bother answering. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Do you want to hear it? I asked. Mom's face drained of color. Vivian, don't. I pressed play. The audio blasted into the quiet evening air. Naomi's voice. Just 5 more days. After 30 days, she can't kick us out. My mother's. And once you give birth here, she'll never be able to get rid of us. She'll have to go through legal hell. Their laughter echoed across the porch. Their voices dripped with pride. Naomi froze. Her mouth fell open. Bella stared confused. Mom's hands started to shake. I watched them the way someone watches a storm approach, with grim clarity and acceptance. After 2 full minutes, I stopped the recording. Mom's voice cracked. Vivian, sweetheart, we were joking. You misunderstood. I didn't let her finish. Where's your house, Mom? I asked coldly. She blinked. What? Your house. The one being renovated. Where is it? Why are strangers living in it? Her jaw locked. Her eyes darted away. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. You sold it, I said quietly. Before you came here. Before the suitcases. Before the tears. Before the lies. You sold it knowing you would use my house as a backup. Naomi stepped forward, desperation creeping into her voice. Vivian, listen. No, I cut her off. You listen. I took you in. I fed you. I trusted you. And you laughed about stealing the one thing I worked my whole life for. She cried harder, her shoulders shaking. I'm pregnant. You're heartless. Your pregnancies doesn't give you a license to destroy someone else's life, I said. Mom tried again, reaching for my arm like she used to when I was a child. Vivian, please, we had nowhere else. I stepped back. You had a house. You chose to sell it. You had a life. You chose to burn it down. I don't owe you my home just because we share blood. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my mother's eyes. Fear of me. And maybe fear of the truth. I walked inside and shut the door. They remained on the porch, voices rising, pleading, crying, then shouting. But Evan was beside me, small hand clutching mine, and I refused to let him hear more. 15 minutes later, just when I thought they might finally leave, red and blue lights flashed across the window. A police car. Of course. They weren't finished yet. I opened the door as 2 officers, 1 woman, 1 man, stepped onto the porch. My mother and Naomi were clinging to each other dramatically. The male officer turned to me. Ma'am, we received a call reporting a family dispute. We need to understand what's happening. I nodded calmly. Of course. Mom jumped in. She threw us out. She threw out a pregnant woman at night. She's unstable. Let me show you something, I interrupted gently. I played the same recording again. This time, the police heard the entire conversation. The planning, the mocking, the intention to manipulate the law. When it ended, the male officer turned to my mother and sister with a look of disgust. Ma'am, he said slowly, this is her home. She has the right to ask you to leave. Mom sputtered, but she filmed us without permission. That's illegal. It's her house, this officer replied. She can install surveillance inside her property. Naomi clutched her stomach dramatically. But I'm pregnant. You can't throw a pregnant woman out. The female officer crossed her arms. Even if you were due tonight, this is not your residence. You have no legal claim here. Naomi's face crumpled. Mom looked like she was about to faint. Within minutes, the officers ordered them to leave. A taxi was called. 5 suitcases were loaded in silence. Bella looked back once, confused and scared, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Naomi just stared at me, like I had destroyed a world she thought she owned. The taxi door closed. And just like that, the storm I had led into my home was driven away. I stood on the porch until the taillights disappeared. Then, for the first time in 25 days, I inhaled fully. My home was mine again. But the peace was short-lived. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. Not just once, but over and over like it was panicking. 5 missed calls, then 7, then 9. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end nearly blew out my eardrum. Vivian Carlisle, what kind of monster are you? It was Aunt Lauren, my mom's older sister, the relative who could turn a whisper into a wildfire. I held the phone away from my ear. Aunt Lauren, slow down. Your mother called me at 1 a.m, she shrieked. She and Naomi were sobbing outside. They said you threw them out onto the street in the middle of the night with a pregnant woman and a child. My jaw dropped. That's not what happened. Don't lie to me, she shot back. They said they begged you to let them stay inside until morning and you slammed the door in their faces. I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course they would twist the story before I even had time to sip my coffee. Aunt Lauren, I said as calmly as I could, the police were here at 7 p.m., not 1 a.m. The officers told them to leave. I packed their bags neatly. There's video. You don't have the full picture. I don't want your excuses, she snapped. I never thought you were capable of this. Your own mother, your pregnant sister. You'll regret this when karma comes for you. Then she hung up. Just like that. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. Evan peeked into my bedroom doorway. His hair was messy, eyes still sleepy. Mom, who was yelling? I forced a gentle smile. No one you need to worry about, sweetheart. Go wash up. I'll make breakfast. But by noon, I'd received 10 more calls. All variations of, how could you? You heartless child. Family is everything. Your mother sacrificed so much for you. You kicked Naomi out at night? She's pregnant. What kind of mother does something like that? Several aunts threatened to come talk to me in person. One uncle said he hoped I'd burn in hell. Another relative sent a whole block of texts accusing me of abandoning blood. All based on lies. All from the same script. One my mother and sister clearly rehearsed together after being forced to leave. By 3 p.m., my hands were shaking from anger, not from their insults, but from the fact that this was exactly what the recording had predicted. If Vivian does anything, we'll twist the story online. Everyone will believe us. And they were right. Because until that moment, the only people who knew the truth were me and a camera hidden in my living room. I stared at my phone, pulse pounding. I wasn't going to let this happen. Not again. Not like when Mom favored Naomi my whole childhood. Not when she made me feel guilty for wanting fairness. Not when Naomi cried her way out of every consequence. Not when they used my silence against me. I wasn't going to let them paint me as the villain in a story where they wrote the script. So I took a long breath and made the next critical move. I called David, Naomi's husband. When he answered, his voice sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Vivian, he muttered. I was wondering when you'd call. That startled me. You expected this? Let's just say I knew Naomi's plans would eventually touch your doorstep. There was a heaviness to his voice, like he'd been carrying something for a very long time. David, I said softly, I need the truth. What's been going on? Why haven't you visited her? Why did they come to me with no home to return to? He let out a long exhale, the kind someone releases right before ripping off a bandage. It's time you knew, he said. But I'm warning you, it's bad. I felt my stomach twist. He continued. A few months ago, Naomi took all our savings, everything, and invested it in some crypto scam, didn't tell me. Lost it all. My breath caught. But instead of stopping, she borrowed more money. From private lenders. Predatory lenders. She was trying to win it back, and she lost that too. I gripped the edge of the counter. How much? Roughly $800,000. I nearly dropped the phone. $800,000? Yes, he said dryly. And we had to sell the house to pay off what we could. That's why she came running to your mom. But your mother, well... There was bitterness in his tone now. Your mom sold her house to help Naomi. Completely. Every penny. They burned through that too. It took me a full 10 seconds to absorb that. Everything clicked at once. The vague renovation story. The silence about finances. The sudden appearance at my door with suitcases. The obsession with the 30-day mark. The pregnancy card. The whispering. They weren't just trying to stay here. They were trying to secure a new life at my expense. The house wasn't just shelter. It was the only asset left in the family. The prize. The last place they could land. David sighed. I didn't call or visit Naomi because she told me she didn't want me to, and she blocked me from seeing Bella, so I stayed away. I closed my eyes. My chest hurt in a way that wasn't from anger, it was from grief. Naomi wasn't just selfish. She was spiraling and dragging everyone down with her. Even Mom. Maybe especially Mom. Thank you, David, I finally whispered, for telling me. I'm sorry it had to come to this, he said. I hung up and stared at the wall. For the first time in my life, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at the calls, not at the slander, not even at the lies. I was angry because Mom's blind favoritism had grown so big it devoured everything. Her house, Naomi's marriage, Bella's security, my peace, my home. Everything had been sacrificed to protect Naomi, the delicate one, the weaker one, the one who needed more help. Meanwhile, I, the strong one, had been set on fire to keep them warm. And now they wanted to take the last unburned piece of my life. No, no more. That evening, I took the final step. I opened my phone and created a group chat with every single relative who had called to curse me. Almost 20 people. In the chat, I wrote one sentence. Before you judge me, watch this. Then I attached the recording. All 20 minutes of it. Naomi's voice. Mom's laughter. Their mocks. Their plans. Their countdown. Their intent to use pregnancy as leverage. Their bragging about manipulating me. Then I hit send. For 20 minutes, the chat was completely silent. Pins and needles, breath-holding silence. Then the messages began. One by one. Heart emojis. Shock emojis. Paragraphs of apologies. Voice notes filled with shame. Finally, Aunt Lauren herself called me. Her voice trembled. Vivian, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea. They told me, you threw them out at night. I believe them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stared out the window. I understand, I said quietly. You were fooled like everyone else. And Vivian, she hesitated, I kicked them out of my house too. They came here after you threw them out. I believe their story. But after watching the video, I can't have people like that in my home. I closed my eyes. Part of me felt relief. The other part felt empty, as if I'd finally opened a wound that had been rotting for decades. By nightfall, every relative had apologized. Everyone except the two people who mattered most, my mother and my sister. But I didn't expect an apology from them. Not anymore. Not ever. Because the next morning, the real war began. A year has passed. It's strange how time moves differently after a storm. Slow at first, like the world is stunned from the impact. Then quietly, almost gently, things begin to rebuild. If you walked into my home today, you'd never know how close it came to being stolen. You wouldn't see the shadows of whispered conspiracies or feel the echo of betrayal in the walls. The house is bright again, warm again, mine again. Completely mine. But the scars remain, not painful anymore, but permanent. A reminder. Evan is 11 now, taller, more confident. His eyes don't dart around the room in fear of hidden conversations. His shoulders aren't tense. He laughs freely again. The easy, bright kind of laughter that fills the entire house. Sometimes I watch him doing homework at the kitchen table or chasing the dog in the backyard, and I feel something tighten in my chest. A mix of love and gratitude. Because he saved us. If he hadn't come to me that night and whispered, Mom, I have a secret, I might have found myself months later fighting eviction notices from my own home, or worse, fighting to protect my son's sense of safety. He is the reason I learned the truth before it was too late. He is the reason I didn't become a victim of the people who were supposed to protect me. He is the reason I finally stopped letting my mother and sister write the story of my life. And I will never forget that. As for Margaret and Naomi, it has been 12 months since the night the police escorted them off my porch. 12 months since I last heard my mother's voice. 12 months since I last saw my sister's face. 12 months since the group chat eruption and the flood of apologies. Not a single phone call, not a single message, not even a birthday card for Evan. Nothing. It's as if they vanished entirely. Occasionally, a relative passes along information in hushed tones, unsure how much I want to hear. Naomi gave birth to a boy. She named him Noah. I don't ask for details. I don't ask whether she's doing well or struggling. I don't ask if she's still staying with Aunt Lauren or hopping from place to place. I don't ask if David ever came back into the picture. Some stories don't need sequels. All I know is this. I don't want their chaos anywhere near Evan or near me. Not now, not in 5 years, not ever. There are betrayals that cut so deep, the wound never closes enough for reunion. Some people will say, but they're your mother and sister. And I'll say, blood is biology. Loyalty is a choice. And they made theirs, over and over again. My relationship with Marcus changed too. Marcus, my boyfriend, wasn't living with us when everything happened. We had only been dating for about a year at the time. He knew bits of my family history, but I had never burdened him with the full truth. But after the recording surfaced and the drama exploded, I finally told him everything. The favoritism, the unequal childhood, the wedding disparities, the emotional neglect. And he did something no one in my childhood ever did. He listened. He didn't question my pain. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't say, maybe they didn't mean it. He said, Vivian, you deserve better. You always did. Hearing that, hearing those words from someone who loved me without obligation, it healed something inside me I didn't know was still bleeding. He still lives in his own place, but we spend weekends together, slowly, comfortably, no pressure, no rushing, just peace. His ex-girlfriend Rachel, once a complicated presence in our early dating life, has fully drifted out of the picture. No drama, no jealousy, no ghosts. After the chaos with my mother and sister, I realized something. I don't want intensity anymore. I don't want emotional roller coasters. I don't want people who love like hurricanes. I want quiet, steady, consistent. Marcus gives me that. And for now, it's enough. The house feels different now. Not haunted, liberated. The living room where Margaret and Naomi laughed about taking my home, it's repainted, soft sage green, calm, clean, fresh. The kitchen where they whispered behind my back, it's brighter now. Evan picked out new curtains, ones with tiny stars on them. He said they make the room less heavy. Naomi's old room? It's Evan's art room now. Canvases, brushes, splashes of color everywhere. He said it's where scary memories go to die. I didn't argue. My mother's old guest room? Empty. And it's going to stay that way. Sometimes Evan still asks. Not often, but quietly, softly, when he's feeling fragile. Mom, where are Grandma and Aunt Naomi now? I always answer the same way. They live far away. We don't stay in touch anymore. He'll pause, then nod slowly. Okay. He never asks why. Maybe he already knows. Maybe he remembers the fear. Maybe he remembers the whispered words that forced him to grow up too quickly. One day, when he's older, old enough to understand manipulation, betrayal, and the way people justify cruelty to themselves, I'll tell him the whole truth. But not now. Right now, all he needs to know is that I protected him, that I will always protect him, that this home is safe, that he is safe, and so am I. For the first time in my life, I understand something I never understood as a child. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Helping others is beautiful, but sacrificing yourself for people who would gladly destroy you is not noble, it's dangerous. And family. Family is not an excuse to tolerate cruelty. If anything, betrayal from family cuts deeper because they start the fight already standing close to your heart. So if my story teaches anything, let it be this. Your home is worth protecting. Your peace is worth defending. Your boundaries are not up for negotiation. Evidence matters, and being kind does not mean being blind. Before I end this story, I want to ask you something. If you were standing in my shoes, if your mother and sister had schemed to steal your home, mocked your intelligence, plotted to use the law against you, and twisted the truth to turn the whole family against you, what would you have done? Would you have let them stay, or would you have done what I did, closed the door, and saved your home, your child, and your peace? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts.